Today we're gonna talk about lighting and the different kind of lighting, which means we have two main type of lighting: hard light and soft light. So, as an example, you can see sunlight in the background. The difference between hard and soft light is the shadow, the texture of the shadow, the line made by the effect on the background. Like, for example, in that background there, you see the shadow. It's very defined. Yeah. So my hand shadow is very defined. This shadow is very defined. Nevertheless, when we talk about soft light, we talk about a big surface of the light, which makes the shadow more with a bigger gradient, which means the shadow, as you can see here, doesn't have the same gradient like the one in the background. So, as an example of portrait lighting, of course, most of the people and the photographers are using a soft light because it's more pleasant for the human face. But sometimes in doing the portrait, even in classical Hollywood type of portraits, the photographers or the cinematographers have used hard light. So the difference between the hard light and soft light, it's like you can see it here. If I'm turning off this one, this is a hard light. So the shadows are very defined, and also the feeling of contrast is different. What contrast means? I'm talking about the lighting contrast, and I'm not talking about the dynamic range. It's the range between the black, the darkest black and the whitest white, and that ratio it's measured in steps, T-stops, or contrast ranges, which means 1 to 128, 1 to 100 to 50, or whatever. So, and that's the whole range of the brightness or the dark areas which camera is capable to register. So, getting back to the contrast and the lighting, one of the terms we will talk about today is the texture of the light, which is, as an example, it's harsh. I mean, hard light and soft light, and the contrast ratio, which is the ratio between the key light, which is this light, and the fill light. Fill light is usually can be an ambient light. Ambient light, depending on how much light it's entering through the windows here. The problem with the windows, as I told you on the class before, is the difference on white balance temperature. So the source outside, it's the sun. The sun midday or this time of day, the color temperature of the source it's around 5,600 kelvins. The inside temperature of the lights are on 3,200 kelvins. So this difference, and you can see it on the video right now. It's the camera. It's seeing this white as neutral, and the white in the background as blue. So that's a topic we're gonna get back on the different video. But now, getting back to the light and the contrast ratio, I will show you how the contrast ratio and the mood of the scene can be influenced by this contrast ratio. Getting back to the lighting style, we have those two, let's say, big norms of lighting a scene, which is a high key and a low key, or chiaroscuro. The chiaroscuro is the term which has been used in painting, defining a big contrast paintings like Caravaggio's, Rembrandt, Georges de la Tour, and we have a lot of examples of painters who use in the Baroque period of time this kind of lighting or contrast. Anyway, getting back to the, this lighting ratio, I will show you how the lighting ratio between fill and the key light defines the contrast ratio. So we can adjust this intensity because the lighting itself, the light itself has three values: intensity, factor, I mean it is soft or it's hard light, direction, and color temperature. So there are four values which are very important when we use a light. And right now the lighting ratio, it's a normal one. So we can make it bigger by taking out one of screens on the light, or we can make it smaller, the contrast, by adding more of those. So now the contrast is smaller than it was before. The structure of the light is the same. We have the key light, which is hard light, and the fill light, which is soft. As you can see, the shadow which is cast on the portrait is very soft here, except this one is very hard. Yeah. So we can make now a difference by changing the light structure with a soft light. Yeah. So now we can see the key light, it's also a soft light. The fill light, it's as well a soft light. Now, in the lighting ratio and the position of the lights, as I told you before, it's sometimes important because it says different things about the model itself. Let me take this out from here because you can't. Really see the model. It's very patient. So the direction of the light says a different story about the character. Yeah, as you can see it here, this kind of key light position it was used in The Godfather. If you saw the movie, Francis Ford Coppola's trilogy, Godfather 1, 2, and 3. And in Godfather 1, the Marlon Brando character, it's most of the time lighting like that. So his eyes are always shadowed, and that's the lighting scheme for all the movie when the character of Marlon Brando is appearing in the shot. Also, because most of the photographers in the golden age of the Hollywood movies have used this kind of lighting, sometimes it was kind of a very fashionable lighting, and I'm talking about different women characters like Rita Hayworth or let me just get in here. And it was called the butterfly key, which means the nose, it's making a shadow like a butterfly. Well, this model is not the proper one for seeing the butterfly scheme, but Marlene Dietrich or Rita Hayworth had a lot of pictures with this kind of lighting scheme, and the photographers have used intensively in 30s and 40s for some of the portraits they made it that time. Okay. So now the position. So the position of the light is very important to set a mood, because if the light is the character is backlit, and the ratio it's a big one. Let me just get out some. And the ratio it's a big one, then the contrast is also big. So I will take some pictures to make this more obvious. And let's turn on this one too. So sometimes in a lighting scheme, we have involved more than 2 lights. So as an example, we can adjust the ratio between the key backlight and the fill to make it more obvious this kind of contrast. So there's a lighting ratio between the key light and fill, and is also within this lighting scheme we have a backlit situation, which is hard light. The other ones are soft light. So we can also change the intensity of the key light, bringing it closer the light, or using a bigger light. We don't have here a bigger light, so I used to bring it closer. It's easier. And the backlit can be even more edgy. So this is more like an edge light, like a rim light. You can call it. Sorry, I was speaking on in the same time. So now we have a 3-point lighting scheme. 3-point lighting scheme means we have 3 lights involved in the scheme, and we have a key light, a fill light, and an effect light, which can be, as I told you, can be a backlight, can be a rim light, can be a kicker, or an effect light, which sometimes we can use like this kind of type of things, or make it even more obvious. Just something like that. So sometimes the key light can be changed as a position, intensity, and texture by changing the light texture using a hard light instead of a soft light. And each of those types of lighting are equally used in portrait or film lighting. So sometimes we have, especially when we do a portrait lighting in a photo studio, we can use a single light. And a single light can be also used in the Rembrandt type of lighting, which is the 3/4 frontal light. versiunul kada. So as you can see now, it's called Rembrandt light because Rembrandt have used in his paintings, and it's defined by this triangle on the other cheek opposite to the direction of the key light. So this is kind of a Rembrandt type of lighting scheme. You can see it more when we do it more like a harsh light, hard light, than in a soft light type of thing. Anyway, so getting back to the position, we can also make it totally black here, and I'll do it right now. Just to see how much of the light and single light will look on the portrait. So we can also change the position of the light. So this is it's just not a rectangle. It's more like it's a rectangle. It's not a square. So we can change the ratio of the position just by changing the position of the softbox, just turning it around. Anyway, sometimes we need a backlit or a kicker just to separate the model from the background. It's not the case here because the background is totally black now, but you can make it not that black. We can open up the blind. And we can see now the depth of the composition. Yeah. Sometimes we don't want to see that depth, and we use just a flat surface and a flat surface, which, like this type of background, it's used when, wait a second. In this portrait, I just shot it, and I'll insert it in the video. We have two types of backgrounds. One with big depth, which it enhancing the tridimensionality of the space, and one just straight on, like very flat background with the model in front of it. It's very usual to do this kind of backgrounds for portrait photographs. It's very unusual to do this in the movie, because in a movie we trying to transmit that feeling of tridimensionality on the screen, which is bidimensional. It's just height and width. And this vision of single point, single vanishing point perspective, it's very specific used in the movies. If you saw the Wes Anderson movies, he's having this frontal position of the camera and the vanishing point is just one vanishing point. I will get back to this when we're going to talk about perspective and the way of enhancing or diminishing the perspective in the composition. Sometimes we want to use an effect lighting, like you can see it now in that camera. Effect lighting means sometimes we want to use a lens flare. Lens flare is this effect here. So this is with, without. So this is very specific lighting effect, and sometimes we use in exterior shots the sun itself or some glares or reflects in shiny surfaces to enhance or place a lens flare within the frame. So as you can see, the effect is very strange. I mean, it is a very specific one, and if you want to keep that lighting visible, you have to take that flare away. So this is a good ratio, and you can see how the fill to key light it's shown. With the lens flare, you can't really see this. So I will take out the flare by raising the light and masking the okay. So the burn dorns on the light can do this, taking out the flare. Anyway, getting back to the backgrounds and the depth cues we use in film and photography. Depth cues means how the space tridimensionality is shown on the final product, either photograph or video, and if you want to enhance that or just diminish it. In the pictures I will going to show you now, this depth filling it's missing because the background is totally flat. But also this flatness can be enhanced by changing the type of lighting on the background. So sometimes we can adjust the intensity and the feeling of different contrast on the background relating with the character, or we can make an effect on a background by placing another light on it. And in a way, sometimes it's easier to make a distinction between the character and the background by placing a light on this opposite part of the light, the key light. So then, I will show, of course, all the pictures. Then the separation from the from the character to the background is more obvious. Otherwise, if the lighting ratio is small, so the contrast is not that big, the difference between model itself and the background is not visible. Either if there's a little ratio, there's a little key to fill ratio here, which is not a big one. It's not like we had it before as a contrast ratio I'm talking about now. But still, the difference between the character itself and The background is, of course, totally different, and the feeling as well. So, talking about depth cues. These cues are as follows. The linear perspective, which in the space, in any space, we can feel it like the converging lines of the set or buildings where photographs are meeting in one vanishing point, in two vanishing points, or three vanishing points. The frontal perspective means that there's one vanishing point in the composition. When we talk about two vanishing points, then the perspective is not frontal, it's not straight on, like this one here. So, in a way, we have two perspectives here. We have one perspective which is more or less frontal on the wide shot, and we have a three-quarter perspective, which is a two vanishing points perspective on a tight shot. If I'm widen up the tight shot, which I'm going to do it now, we can see a different perspective of the room, which looks different than on this previous wide shot. So I'm getting back to zooming in, back to how it was. Okay, a little wider. Nice. And so that's the one depth cues, the linear perspective. The linear perspective, of course, was used in paintings from Renaissance till now, in sketches, whatever, in paintings. Then in 19th century, when the photographs was introduced, of course, the photographers have used the linear perspective as a tool to enhance the depth of the composition. Another depth cues is the texture. The texture can be coarse or fine, and that is depending on how far or close to the camera that texture is. So let's talk about grass, for instance. We have a different texture of the grass on the closer plan, on action plan, and we have a different texture of the grass on the background. So here the grass will look more coarser texture and have a different contrast, and the texture of the grass on the background is going to be very even, like a neutral texture without any contrast. So that's another depth cues. One of the most important depth cues in cinema and photograph is the overlapping. Overlapping means between the camera and the action plan, we have a different different plan of action, which can be also, let's say, in cinema, we can talk about over the shoulder. So if I'm talking with that character here, I'm not sure if I'm on both cameras, maybe I'm here. So on this camera, this over the shoulders emphasize the depth of the composition. So we see clearly we have this action plan here, we have the character plan, and we have the background. And on that camera as well, we do feel the same thing, like having me here as a relation in a dialogue, let's say it, with a character. We have different, we enhance the position of different objects in a frame, and therefore we feel the depth of the composition. Sometimes this is not used as enhancing the tridimensionality. It's just used for showing the set and the environment we're gonna shoot or photograph on.